So perhaps, Mr. Chairman, we just go through that if we've all got the right run. The first one up is page 7, and some of these adjustments are pretty minor, frankly. So the first sheet is pretty minor. It's just clarification of what sort of rates they are and what sort of charges. And if we go to the next one, which is page 9, they wanted additional clarification there under big investments, the Ruataniwha. They wanted just clarification what financial close meant, and Liz has added this one in, conditions on consenting investment, design and construction and uptake being met by financial close. It's just clarification of that. And there's an addition there that right down the bottom that if any of these investments do not proceed, then HBRC will reconsider the use of the funds set aside for investment, and that's true. I mean, the question could be asked, if you don't invest in these, what will happen to the funds? Well, that's what will happen to the funds. Other areas of economic development opportunities will be looked at, and that's where an adjustment's been made for that Kiwi Rail as well, because they said there needed to be better clarification. And then page 11 is where this Taradale and Napier Hill thing has come in, and they picked up on the same point as Councillor Scott has. And of course we would select different ones if we had the opportunity now, because it does indicate that perhaps those on Napier Hill are paying a lot less than the poor people in Taradale. Yeah. But that's as it is. And over leaf, what do we got? Page 13. Page 13, the line went back into the graph. It should always have been there. There's a couple of figures ilted at the top there. And the funding strategy chart, they said, well, let's have a title. So we said, well, what it is HBRC's funding strategies over the 10 years, which it is. And we also extended the line for HBRC, or Port of Napier dividends, right through. What I tried to have an impact of the increasing nature of the investments in the higher years of increase, but of course dividends increase every year, some more than others. So we just extended the line. It seemed the way to do it. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the changes that have been made to the consultation document, and the one that I'm requesting consideration and adoption of is the version in the big sheet. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to pick up on one of the changes that have been made since it came back to audit. That's under our plan on page 7, item 7, where is changed the section 36 charges, which is quite sensible, to resource management charges, but that still doesn't make much sense to the ordinary person who might just read this when it arrives in there. I do question whether we should actually put under the RMA or something. It does actually say consent holders, but the first person who thinks, what am I being charged for next? So just trying to make it clear to people who are reading it. Yeah. Resource management. Yeah.
Just put RMA.
It's not going to alter anything that needs to be audited, no. I don't believe, but not everyone is au fait with.
So, did you want RMA in there?
Well, it's shorter than Resource Management Act. I think it is a term that is bandied about enough for most people to know what it is. And I certainly agree, section 36 charges didn't make it clear either, so to something that Order picked up and it's been changed according to that. but I still don't know that it's clear enough for people
So-
that are not involved with.
So if we have resource management charges, and then we have in there, under the
Brackets.
RMA
No, just put
Act,
in
Yeah.
brackets section
Brackets.
36. Just put in brackets section 36.
Well,
Oh.
I just referred to the Act,
Oh, okay.
RMA. Mm.
okay, so you want in there resource management charges in brackets,
In brackets RMA.
RMA,
Mm.
Makes it clear.
brackets, RMA. Okay, what I've done is, on this big sheet here, I have on page 7 made an amendment which you could all make on your sheets, because this is the one you're going to adopt, and which is the one we will send back to the auditors as adoption at this meeting, and it will include in brackets RMA after resource management charges on page 7, which is on the right hand column if you've found it. And Drew will put that in and then send it back to audit before they release their final approval.
Once we adopted it, does it have to go back? By changing that, it has to go back to audit?
They, from what I understand, and I talked to them as recently as 10 minutes before coming here,
Well, then,
what's in front of you and you
yeah,
adopt.
Okay, well, let's just adopt. I'm sorry, take it out again. If people are confused,
Okay.
let them be confused.
Okay.
Confusion might encourage more submissions, councillor, perhaps.
But there's a section in the supporting accountability papers under resource management charges, so if a person was challenged by that, they would go to the web and put in resource management charges, and boom, up would come 7 pages of resource management charges under the RMA Act. Yeah.
Okay, anything
Right,
further?
that's the consultation document. The supporting accountability documents, also, supporting accountability documents have to be approved prior to the consultation document, because you approve those because they support the document you're going to send to the public. So you approve those first, and then you do the consultation document. So the supporting accountability documents, which basically will make up about 90% of the final LTP, is obvious to you because of the wad of them. They have been given out in hard copy here, sent out last week to you. There have been some minor amendments from the versions that you've seen in the February workshops, and I apologise for not marking them up, but as we moved through, they were minor, and we kind of lost our way on what words were being changed at what time, but there isn't anything of any substance being changed in there. It's cosmetic in nature. So that's the volume that's to be adopted. But again, at the last minute...
Paul, excuse me.
Sorry.
In terms of minor, and if you haven't tracked them, can you just answer me, has anything been changed to do with gravel extraction in Central Hawke's Bay? Any wording?
No.
Thank
no,
you.
No.
Really hard to get it.
No, there'd be the odd paragraph of clarification about an accounting policy or an assumption that could be clarified, that sort of thing. Yeah. The big wad was put out last week, and that's in front of you. However, the last minute the audit have some comments that they want to, or changes that they wanted to be made from what was sent to you. Okay, so what I've done here is on the handout that was put on your table this morning, I've indicated those changes that have been made to the big wad here. So when you we need to go through very quickly these changes, which are all just words and whatever, but the important thing is that you know they have been changed, and when you adopt this wad here, it will reflect those changes. Okay, so the first one up there is the significant forecasting assumptions. It's on, yeah, they're not numbered, these sheets, unfortunately, but it's the pile you've been given is...
First one's the infrastructure strategy.
No, yeah, the first one is the infrastructure strategy. It's on your pile after this big wad. Have you find there. From the infrastructure strategy, page 11. Have you got that one? Hopefully I haven't lost you. You'll notice there that under 3.4 of the infrastructure strategy that they required some clarification on level of service change options, and so we wordsmithed a sentence to give effect to the reviews that are going to take place over the next 6 years on determining the appropriate levels of service, and that refers to the consultation. It's a clarification thing. Okay, the next sheet over from that refers to the significant forecasting assumptions. Again, just a little bit of clarification. The projected HBRC dividends, which most of them coming from the port, they've been in the work papers for a while. It's gone to a workshop back, I think, December. We just hadn't put the numbers in here, so they said, oh, well, I think you should put the numbers in. So, I mean, that's quite easy. We just put the numbers in. The next sheet over, this is the significant forecasting assumptions, and they like documents relating to other documents, so they've got here that under infrastructure assets I should refer to the infrastructure strategy, which is a new strategy, and people are advised or encouraged to read that as well as this one, like when they're reading through the significant forecasting assumptions, and they can then branch off into the infrastructure strategy if they're so interested. The next one over is the financial strategy. There was a small change in there about population, and that was already before you in the significant forecasting assumptions. They've said you just need to repeat it in the financial strategy, so that was fine. That's exactly what we did. And that is the end of all those little changes. So, Mr. Chairman, we have all the changes made from those, from the papers distributed to the council for this meeting. We've gone through all those changes, so if councillors are comfortable, we could go to the recommendations and adopt firstly the supporting papers, which will go on the website, and then the consultation document, which will go out. And Drew's coming, the next paper, Drew will take you through how he proposes that document will be used for consultation purposes. So the recommendations on item 8 is where we are now, which is at the bottom of
page 15 of our
15.
papers. Yeah, okay. So any final questions before we get to the recommendations? I have one. You know, this is new, having this consultation document in its form. Have audit, how do you say this politely, have audit been anywhere near helpful in this process?
Yeah, I'd like to think they were, because I think their suggestion of clearly identifying the options, which incidentally have been done in most of the CD documents, clearly identifying the options, because the Act does say set your options down and put them across in that way. I think because some of our options were status quo, we hadn't written them up that way, so I think the document that people will be reading will see quite clearly if they want to comment on an issue, it's either this one or that one, which makes it a lot easier for them. So I think that part of it anyway, I think was worthwhile.
Right. Further questions? Someone happy to take us to the recommendations?
Question I raised before, just in are you still happy the usual calculations on a return on investment of 6% on Rua Taniwha? Because as we discussed before, it doesn't, even if you amortise it over 20 years, it doesn't. I know these are just targets, but it just seems that we're targeting something we can't do.
No, that's a return on the funding that this council puts into our big investment projects. That's the return that we require in the medium to long term in the plan. Now, how that's funded is a moot. point.
But we clearly know that we can't get that amortised over 20 years. We know that.
But the statement there, Councillor, is that the funding this council puts into the Taniwha requires a return of 6%, so as this council can continue to have a valid operating account. Now we know that those funds for the short term, at least, are coming through council's other strong investment, which is the port. So the return is achieved in the term of this plan. Beyond this plan, or towards the end of this plan, you'll have the opportunity to look at a couple more LTPs by then, and we'll be aware of, if the Taniwha goes ahead, we'll be aware of returns on that project.
Even if it's budgeting, we can't. The budget are saying we're not going to achieve it. I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
it just seems
Different.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
And I also, I think the risk, I've said so before, but the risk profiles, I just don't agree with them. On page 10 of the financial strategy, to say that farmer uptake is medium when they've only got 15% secured after 18 months, I know we can have a debate on this, but medium would seem very optimistic to me.
Yes, Councillor, I mean, that was, those risk ones were put together probably on this continuum probably 2.5 months ago.
Yeah, and I made my point then as well.
Right.
De novo.
Councillor Dick. Mr. Mohi.
Was there any particular reason that the only Māori venue was at 4 o'clock and everybody else was 5:30?
Drew might have an idea of that one.
We have a chance to get some information
paper.
from Mr. Broadley in the next paper. We'll save that till then. He will give us a very clear answer now he's been forewarned, Mr. Mohi, why that's happening. So the recommendations, someone happy to take us to the recommendations? Councillor Scott, happy to move? We've got to get this done. You're happy to second, Councillor Dick. Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I realise that this has been a long and quite difficult process for everyone, and it is a new approach. I think the simplified consultation document it's clearly presented, it's well laid out, it's great, but I am disappointed that we've got to this stage and we find things in it that we didn't have a chance to comment on before it got there. How that process could be overcome, whether it could, in future actually go through email iterations, I don't know. But certainly I think it's very difficult for council to come to adopting something as important as this and told the choices are cut short the consultation period or adopt it as it is. That is not a good way of taking full responsibility for what's going out. Personally, I think some of the questions could have been better termed in what and why we're asking that. I'm hoping that a lot of people will get this, will read it, will respond, and maybe they've never responded to the Regional Council before. They're not the people who are, taking an interest in following us. There might be people who say, oh yeah, I want to have a say on that. And you ask them, should we speed this work up, or could we just cut our coat to, cloth to suit our coat, whatever. Well, you'd say, no, you take more time. There's no understanding of why you would actually be asking why it's needed to be speeded up. I think some of the questions really are the voting for an early Christmas for a turkey questions, and I find that a little bit disappointing. A lot of people will know what's behind it, but I'm hoping we'll engage with a lot more wider people through this and get them to take an interest. It is their council, it is their rates, they should be taking an interest. It is their environment, it is their economy that we're talking about, so we do hope that they will engage with it. But I guess it's the first time we've done it. It's a bit of a learning experience. I think overall the layout of the document is great, I like it, and I hope people will sit down and read it. So thank you for all the hard work. But
Councillor Dick?
Yeah, Mr Chairman, just a compliment to the staff. A really massive undertaking, and the attempt to make everything word perfect, well, that's pretty hard to achieve. The consultation document has shaped up pretty well. I'd change one or two words, but I'm not going to suggest we do. And I'm very pleased that you took up the suggestion to change the format of the headings on the activities section of the plan, which to me is key, because that actually tells people what the council really does, and it's far more readable now with the groups, the heading comprising the title of the group of activities and then the specific activity itself. So I'd say overall, well done.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'd just like to make a comment as a new time councillor going through this process. I appreciate, Paul, that you're at the end of the wire and you've about had enough of it. Most of us are floating around here half an hour before a meeting. If there are significant documents like this, it would be really helpful if you handed them to us half an hour before the meeting rather than waiting till we sit down, because I put a lot of time into reading all of these papers, and I like to be considered and informed. So just give some consideration to that space before the meeting with documents that are floating around, because this is important. Thank you for recognising the changes to the email addresses so that this is accurate and we will get feedback, and I look forward to being part of the process from here.
I'd take it. Oh, Councillor Grant.
Despite the fact I'm not happy with everything in it, I still want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone to here. Clearly, it's a huge amount of work for us just to read it, let alone actually sit down and write about it and think about it. So I just want to acknowledge that as well.
Thank you. I'll just add something: new process, new format. It's always hard who gets the last say. We put, I don't know how many workshops went into this, 12 months almost, getting close so far, and we're still not finished. It is a big part of what we do. Very hard to articulate the huge number and complexities of work schemes and programs and actions that we take on a day-to-day basis. But I think this format actually is pretty good. I think we'll hopefully engage with more of our citizens, and that would be great. It's always hard. Who gets the last say? Audit get the last say here, whereas I know timing didn't feature. Maybe it's a lesson that we all learn for next round. I don't know, but who gets the last say seems to be the issue here. Audit come back and say, right, we've agreed with that. We want all these changes, and then we are expected to digest them. Hey, I suppose that's how it works, but it does make it a little harder, I suppose. You wish to sum up?
Just to say one last word on audit, Mr Chairman, when we went through the very first long-term community consultation, whatever it was, LTCCP, and audit came back saying it was no good describing your area in terms of how big it was, who lived there. You should actually put statements like Bogan, capital of the world. And that was what my Takeri had put. And they told us, came back and told us that was the sort of information we should be putting in the plan. So audit do have some funny ideas too.
When for the share contract?
So you're talking about my hometown. I was going to call you to order. I'll put the motion in. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you.